They called 911 on the suspicious old man. I answered the call. My name is Tom Miller, and this is the story of how I was viewed as a dangerous vagrant in my new neighborhood, only to personally answer the 911 call from the neighbor who reported me. But before I tell you about that unforgettable Wednesday night, let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. And if you love justice stories and karma stories, don't forget to subscribe because you're going to want to hear every detail of this story. 6 months ago, I was 65 years old and opening a new chapter in my life after retiring from the Portland Police Bureau. Having served as a detective for 35 years, solved countless cases, and served the community, I now wanted a quiet and peaceful retirement. I had bought a small, modest house in Eastside, 2 bedrooms, a small garden, and most importantly, a quiet neighborhood. Or so I thought. My retirement pension was enough for a comfortable life, but sitting idle wasn't my style. For 35 years, helping people every day, solving problems, and ensuring justice had been my life. That's why I started working part-time at the city's 911 call center. 3 days a week, I worked the evening shift answering emergency calls. 911, what's your emergency? I said this sentence hundreds of times a day, and with every call, I experienced the peace of helping people in their most difficult moments. My neighbors didn't know about this job. To them, I was just the new old man who moved in. Quiet, modest, and a bit mysterious. The East Side neighborhood had been changing in recent years. Young, educated, high-income professionals were moving in, displacing the old residents. A community that wanted perfect lawns, expensive cars, and everything to look safe. In the first weeks, there were polite greetings with my neighbors. My neighbor across the street, Linda Patterson, a 35-year-old lawyer, left for work in her BMW every morning at 7. Jim and Sandra Morrison, the couple on my right, both worked in the tech sector and organized garden parties on weekends. I, on the other hand, quietly came and went with my old Ford pickup, a 2009 model, a bit rusty but reliable. My clothes were simple and practical: jeans, plain t-shirts, well-worn shoes. After spending 35 years in uniform, comfort was my priority. The first signs were small. Linda's glances would last a little longer. The Morrison couple stopped greeting me. I wasn't invited to the neighborhood WhatsApp group, but the real problem started when Jim Morrison began monitoring me. Jim Morrison was one of those types obsessed with neighborhood security, Ring doorbell cameras, garden security lights, and a constant obsession with talking about security. One morning when I went out to get my newspaper, I saw him watching me from his window. When we made eye contact, he quickly pulled back. During that week, I noticed that Jim was noting when I left and when I came back. I was being treated like a criminal. Due to my work schedule, I usually left home in the afternoon and returned late at night. I worked from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. at the 911 center. This schedule seemed suspicious to Jim. One Friday evening, when I returned from work, 2:30 a.m. and parked at my house, I saw that the Morrisons' house lights were on. Jim was watching me from the window. This time he didn't feel the need to hide. He was openly conducting surveillance. The following week, Linda Patterson stopped me on the street and asked, "Are you a tenant or homeowner?" Her expression was cold and official, as if she was conducting an interrogation. "I'm a homeowner," I said politely. "Interesting," she said, "because Jim tried to check your identity but couldn't find any information. This surprised me." "He tried to check my identity?" "For neighborhood security," she said with a shrug. "You've been coming and going at very strange hours lately." In the following weeks, the situation escalated. Jim Morrison was now openly conducting surveillance. He would watch me while doing garden work, note when I left, and check my visitors. Once my old police friend Mike came to visit me. The next day, Linda Patterson came to my door and said, "You had too many people at your house last night. This neighborhood isn't suitable for parties." Mike and I were just two people, and we quietly ate pizza. The Morrison family started sharing their concerns about me in the neighborhood WhatsApp group. Of course, I wasn't in this group, but Mike's wife Helen lived in the same neighborhood and told me about it. "No one knows who he is. He comes and goes at very strange hours. There are suspicious items in his car." This was never true. He doesn't talk to neighbors, very secretive. These concerns gradually grew. In the neighborhood world, theories were being produced about me. Drug dealer, someone planning theft, or worse. The truth was, I was just a retired police officer who liked to live quietly and privately. But in the 21st century, in a perfect neighborhood, even this was considered suspicious behavior. As the neighborhood dynamics changed, I gradually became an outsider. The young professionals community had established their own social networks, leaving me out. When the Morrison couple organized a garden party, the entire street was invited except me. When Linda Patterson organized a neighbor BBQ, there was no invitation at my door. But this wasn't just social exclusion. I was actively being treated as an unwanted person. One day while working in my garden, when the Morrisons' 8-year-old son Tommy was playing in the street, his ball went into my yard. When I approached the fence to get the ball, Jim Morrison immediately came out of his garden. "Tommy, don't go there," he shouted. "Don't talk to that man." The child, confused, wanted his ball, but was frightened by his father's fearful voice and stepped back. I took the ball and handed it over the fence, but Jim immediately pulled his son inside. At that moment, I felt very hurt. As someone who had served the community for 35 years, protected countless children, and helped families, being presented as a danger to a child. In May, the situation reached a critical point. It was a beautiful spring evening in Portland, and I was planting some flowers in my garden. Due to my work hours, I usually did my garden work in the evening. Around 9:30 p.m., while working with gloves and garden tools, I noticed that Jim Morrison was photographing and videotaping me from his window. He wasn't even hiding anymore. "Jim," I called out, "is there a problem?" He closed the window and moved away. The next day, Helen, Mike's wife, called me and told me about the latest messages in the neighborhood WhatsApp group. Suspicious activity in the garden at 9:30 p.m. He had metal tools in his hands. Who knows what he's planning? Should we call the police? At this point, my patience had run out. As someone who had dealt with real criminals and seen real dangers for 35 years, I couldn't stand this paranoia and prejudice, but I decided to be patient. Karma had taught me that sometimes you need to wait. One Wednesday evening in June, I was having an ordinary shift. It wasn't a very busy night at the 911 center. A few traffic accidents, a home burglary report, an elderly woman's fall case. At 10:45 p.m., the phone rang. I answered routinely. 911, what's your emergency? The voice sounded familiar, but I couldn't figure out who it was at first. Yes, hello. I want to report a suspicious situation in our neighborhood. The voice was becoming increasingly familiar, but I still wasn't sure. What's your name and address, sir? Jim Morrison, 1247 Oak Street. There are suspicious activities happening at a house in our neighborhood. My heart started racing. This was my neighborhood, my street. What kind of suspicious activities, Mr. Morrison? Well, this man, someone named Tom Miller, is acting very strange. He comes and goes late at night, nobody knows him, and tonight there are suspicious movements around his house. I continued professionally, but there was excitement inside me. What kind of suspicious movements? He might be burying something in his garden, and generally this man looks dangerous. He doesn't talk to neighbors. His identity is unclear. Mr. Morrison, Is this person currently committing any crime? Is he harming anyone? No, but... Look, this man is definitely not normal. The whole neighborhood is worried. Someone needs to check. Right at that moment, I made a decision. With my 35 years of experience, I knew this was just paranoia and prejudice. But Jim Morrison had a lesson to learn. Mr. Morrison, what is this person's exact address? 1251 Oak Street, right across from me. The exact address of my house. I understand. Mr. Morrison, we will evaluate this report. We'll get back to you. How long will it take? Soon, Mr. Morrison. Very soon. After ending the call, I thought for a few minutes. This wasn't just a report. It was the climax of months of harassment and prejudice. I explained the situation to my colleague Sarah. Sarah, I have a somewhat strange situation. My neighbor reported me to 911, and I answered this call. Sarah laughed. Are you serious? What kind of coincidence is this? It's not coincidence, it's karma, I said. I want to personally handle this call. Sarah knew the protocol, but she also understood the irony of the situation. Normally this wouldn't be possible, but you're a retired detective, and this is a personal matter. I'll send Mike as backup. You go to the site and explain the situation. I had the perfect plan. I waited until my shift ended, 2 a.m., then went directly home. But this time I was going to prepare a surprise for Jim Morrison. Wednesday night at 2:15 a.m., I parked at my house, quietly, as always. But this time I knew Jim Morrison was waiting for me. Indeed, I saw the window curtain being pulled aside. I went into my house and waited 10 minutes. Then I went back outside and walked to the Morrisons' door. I rang the bell. After a few minutes, Jim Morrison cracked open the door. He was surprised to see me. Mr. Morrison, hello, I'm Tom Miller, your neighbor across the street. Yes? His voice was tense and nervous. You called 911 tonight, didn't you? His face changed. Yes, well, yes. I'm also a 911 operator, Mr. Morrison. I've gotten back to you. His mouth fell open. I work part-time at the Portland Police Bureau, 911 call center, and tonight I answered your report. This is impossible. I worked as a detective at the Portland Police Bureau for 35 years, Mr. Morrison. I retired last year but continue to work part-time at the 911 center. Jim Morrison's facial expression was like a movie scene. Shock, shame, fear, and slow realization. Are you police? For 35 years, and now I still serve the community. Every evening I answer emergency calls from citizens like you. I didn't know. Of course you didn't know, Mr. Morrison, because you never asked. You just made assumptions. The next day, news spread in the neighborhood WhatsApp group. Helen told me that Jim Morrison's wife, Sandra, had told the group, and Sandra had written, Tom Miller served 35 years as police officer, now 911 operator to the group. The reactions were varied. Linda Patterson. Oh my God, really? I was so rude to him. Sandra Morrison. Jim is very ashamed. He wants to apologize. Other neighbors. Nobody told us. Why didn't he introduce himself? This last sentence made me think. Really, why hadn't I introduced myself? The answer was simple. After spending 35 years in uniform, I wanted to just be Tom. Just a neighbor, just a human being. But apparently, this wasn't possible in 2023. The first apology came from Jim Morrison. That Friday evening, he came to my door with his wife Sandra. Tom, I'm very sorry, Jim said, looking genuinely ashamed. I behaved very wrongly. I made assumptions and... Jim, it's okay, I said, but in the future, try to get to know someone before judging them. Sandra added, if you're available, come to the Saturday BBQ. The neighborhood wants to get to know you. For the first time, I was being invited to a neighborhood event. That Saturday, BBQ changed everything. As my neighbors learned my real story, their attitudes completely changed. Linda Patterson approached. "Tom, I'm very sorry. I was so rude to you. With my legal background, I should have known better." Other neighbors asked questions with curiosity. "What did you experience during 35 years? What was your most interesting case? Why do you work at 9/11 now?" While answering these questions, I was explaining not just myself, but the law enforcement profession. That police officers aren't just people who catch bad guys, but professionals who serve the community and help people in their most difficult moments every day. Tommy Morrison, Jim's son, was the person who asked the most questions. "Did you drive a police car? Did you ever catch bad guys? Do you have a gun?" I explained to him that the real purpose of police work is to protect and help people. While Jim Morrison was apologizing, he said, "Tom, I thought I was just trying to protect the neighborhood, but apparently I was punishing a good person. Jim, your protective instincts are a good thing, but you need to review your methods. Real security comes from knowing and trusting each other." After that weekend, a completely new dynamic began in the neighborhood. I was no longer the suspicious old man, but Police Tom, or simply Tom. People started consulting me about security concerns. When Linda Patterson's car got scratched, she came to me first. When the Morrison couple wanted to upgrade their home security system, they asked for advice. But most importantly, when they learned I worked as a 911 operator, neighborhood awareness about emergency response increased. Once, when elderly Mrs. Chen fell, neighbors correctly called 911 and also informed me. I was able to help both professionally, as a 911 operator, and personally, as a neighbor. In another incident, when Jim Morrison saw a suspicious vehicle on the street, this time he approached with real observation rather than paranoia, and consulted me. We confirmed it was indeed a suspicious situation and dispatched police. I was also invited to the neighborhood WhatsApp group. Now I was in the role of resident expert on security matters. This experience taught me a lot. As someone who had worked in law enforcement for 35 years, I knew how harmful prejudice and assumptions could be. But being on the victim side this time gave me a completely different perspective. Jim Morrison and other neighbors were making judgments based on appearance and behavior. My quiet lifestyle, work hours, and lack of social interaction seemed suspicious to them. But the truth is, everyone has their own story. I just wanted a quiet and peaceful life after working under intense stress for 35 years. On the other hand, I questioned myself too. Maybe I could have been more open. I could have interacted more with neighbors. I could have introduced myself to the community. But then I realized this wasn't my responsibility. No one should have to prove themselves. Acceptance and respect should be the default, not suspicion. Months later, something very interesting happened. My former captain from the Portland Police Bureau, Dave Williams, was retiring and organizing a retirement party. All former colleagues were invited to the party, and I attended too. Dave had organized a big gathering at a restaurant downtown. While Dave was giving his speech, he noticed me in the audience and said this with the microphone. "Tonight we have very special people here. Tom Miller is also among us. For 35 years he solved the toughest cases, saved countless lives, and now continues to serve the community in retirement." During the applause, I saw a familiar face in the restaurant, Linda Patterson, who had come for dinner with her friends. When she saw me, she was surprised, then smiled and came over. "Tom, how nice to see you here." "Linda, how are you?" "I heard Dave Williams' speech. You've really had an amazing career." That night, as I left the restaurant, Linda was telling her friends about me. "This is my neighbor, Tom, 35 years police officer, a real hero." A year after this experience, the dynamics in our neighborhood had completely changed. Now we have a neighborhood watch program, but it's cooperation-based, not paranoia-based. Jim Morrison now genuinely approaches security matters constructively. Linda Patterson provides pro bono legal help to neighbors on legal matters. The Morrison couple organizes regular neighborhood BBQs. And me? I still work part-time at the 911 center and remember that Wednesday night with every call. Last week, a very similar call came in. Neighbor complaint, suspicious behavior, paranoia. This time another operator took it, but I listened to that call. I advised the situation. This is probably just a misunderstanding. Let's get a little more information before sending patrol. It really was a misunderstanding. The suspicious man was a retired teacher doing bird watching in his garden. The most important lesson of this story is this: real security doesn't come from surveillance and suspicion. It comes from knowing each other, respecting each other, and standing together as a community. Jim Morrison's initial approach wasn't wrong. He wanted to protect his neighborhood, but his methods were counterproductive. Communication and understanding are more effective than paranoia and isolation. The most important thing I learned after working in law enforcement for 35 years, most criminals are actually just misunderstood, and most victims are actually just different. My story is this: assumptions are dangerous, communication is powerful, and karma sometimes comes from the other end of the phone. Today, 2 years have passed since that incident. The change in our neighborhood is incredible. Now we're not just neighbors, we're a real community. Jim Morrison applied to the police academy last month. I wrote him a reference. Jim has a good heart but needs to learn patience, I said. He was accepted and is now in training. Linda Patterson started a neighborhood legal clinic. She provides pro bono services. The Morrison couple organizes monthly potluck dinners. Tommy Morrison is now 10 years old and wants to be a police officer. I tell him stories, what real police work is like, what community service means. And me? I still work at the 911 center, but now I also do community education, not just emergency calls. I go to local schools and teach kids how 911 works. Every Wednesday evening, I remember that memorable phone call, and every time I smile. Last week another call came in. Familiar scenario, suspicious neighbor report. This time I answered the call and gently asked the caller, "Have you ever talked to this person? Maybe you could just try to get acquainted?" The caller paused, thought, and said, "Actually, no. Maybe I should talk to them." The next day they called to thank me. The suspicious neighbor was a retired nurse coming from night shift. Now they're good friends. The most important lessons I learned from this experience. First, everyone deserves respect until proven otherwise. Appearance, schedule, or lifestyle differences are not suspicious behavior. Second, communication is always the solution. If Jim Morrison had approached me directly, months of misunderstanding could have been avoided. Third, karma sometimes has a sense of humor. Reporting someone who was a police officer for 35 years to the police, then that person answering the call, the universe's way of teaching lessons. Fourth, service never really ends. When I took off the police badge, the desire to serve didn't disappear. It continues in different forms. Fifth, community building requires patience. Instant judgments destroy community. Understanding builds it. This story is also a message to all 911 operators. There's a human story behind every call. Paranoia and fear sometimes mask legitimate concerns. Sometimes it's just misunderstanding. Our job isn't just to dispatch, but also to de-escalate, educate, and sometimes be a bridge. That Wednesday night when I answered Jim Morrison's call, technically I should have just taken the report and sent patrol. But years of experience had taught me that sometimes personal touch is more effective. Today, the East Side neighborhood has become a model community. Even our police chief occasionally visits to study our approach. Success factors: know your neighbors, regular social events, casual conversations, genuine interest, communicate concerns directly. Before calling authorities, try neighbor-to-neighbor conversation. Assume positive intent. Different behavior patterns are not automatically suspicious. Build relationships before needing them. Strong relationships are critical during crisis moments. Respect privacy while maintaining connection. Balance between involvement and intrusion. At the beginning of this story, I used the word karma, but actually this wasn't just coincidence. This was the natural consequence of years of service. For 35 years, I served the community. With good faith, with honesty, with dedication. The universe somehow gave me that perfect moment, the opportunity to teach a lesson in my own neighborhood through my own experience. Jim Morrison wasn't a real villain. He was just a person who was scared, misinformed, and had misdirected protective instincts. The real lesson was the power of communication and the danger of assumptions. 2 years later, I feel grateful for this entire experience. It was painful but necessary learning for both me and the community. Jim Morrison is now in the academy and is an excellent student. Linda Patterson is in the role of legal advocate in the neighborhood. Tommy Morrison has been inspired to become a future police officer. And me, still serving in different capacity, working at the 911 center, educating the community, and remembering that lesson every day. People are generally good, just sometimes scared or misinformed. Most conflicts can be resolved with communication, patience, and understanding. Where do you live today? Have similar situations occurred in your neighborhood? Share in the comments. If this story taught you something, don't forget to like and share. And if you love justice and karma stories, don't forget to subscribe because I'll tell you many more stories. My name is Tom Miller. I used to serve as a detective in Portland. Now I help people in their most difficult moments at the 911 center. And sometimes, in the most unexpected moments, karma picks up the phone and says hello.